In terms of the value of Optimus, you really need to think of the basic question: who wouldn't want their own personal C3PO R2D2?
I think we all do.
Want that. I mean, let's ask the crowd. Would you guys like?
Do you guys want an Optimus?
Yeah, exactly. It'd be very cool. It would actually be, by the way, much better in functionality than C3PO and R2D2. So it would be super useful. So I think basically everyone on Earth is going to want one. And you're going to have a bunch in industry. So that's why I think it's probably the world's biggest product, because there's at least a market for probably 20 billion. It could be 50 billion, I don't know, a lot. So, hypothetically, if Tesla was making 1 billion of these a year at scale, and at scale, the cost gets lower and lower. So maybe it'd be like on the order of $50,000. I'm just guessing here. And, that's 30 trillion in revenue.
Insane.
That's a long way to go between here and making 1 billion robots a year.
Yeah.
but I do think something like that may happen.
What would you say is Optimus going to have the biggest impact on? Do you think it's going to start obviously in manufacturing, or at what, not necessarily timeline, but like where do you see Optimus having the biggest impact?
Well, initially it would go to very high value things. So say somebody needs a lot of medical care or something. Optimus could be like a 24-hour-a-day nurse or helper to someone that is quadriplegic or something like that, or something just really it needs physical help. So that's the kind of thing which would be life-changing for a lot of people. Those would be the highest value initial use cases. It will also be used in situations where the work is very dangerous, or where there's a lot of repetitive tasks. But like any work that risks life or some kind of injury would be a good initial use case for Optimus.
When you look ahead in 10 years, what's more transformative, full self-driving or Optimus?
Optimus.
Seems like that was an easy one. You've hinted that we may reach digital superintelligence this year or next. How will we know that we've crossed that line, and what does day one of AGI really look like?
Well, I'm not sure. It may be less profound than at least at first it will be less profound. But like what AI has not done yet is invent new technologies that are useful. So it hasn't discovered new physics, and it has not invented technologies that are useful. But I think that is something that will happen. Yeah.
If Grok becomes smarter than any human, what role do we play? Are we co-pilots, overseers, or just legacy code?
Well, it won't just be Grok. There will be many AI. There will be at least, I think, 4 major AIs, maybe 5, just in the United States. And so even if Grok was not developed, there would still be digital superintelligence. And I've been fighting, personally sort of driving hard on digital superintelligence for a long time, because I wasn't sure if this was a double-edged sword or a single-edged sword or what. But it became very obvious after a while that this was going to happen, whether I participated or not. So therefore, I had a choice of either be a spectator or a participant, but that it was going to happen with or without me. So then I think, well, okay, I'd rather be a participant than a spectator. And I can try to focus on AI safety, which in my view is that the most important thing for AI safety is to be maximally truth-seeking, which means often like saying things that are maybe politically incorrect, but actually factually correct. And also, there'll be mistakes that are made, then admitting the mistakes and taking corrective action. And Grok still has a long way to go to be maximally truth-seeking. But I think this goal is also consistent with inventing new technologies, solving medical problems. If you want to cure cancer, you have to be maximally truth-seeking to understand what the root cause is, for example. So I think that's actually very fundamental, both for safety and for usefulness. And the economy of the future, I think, is going to look quite different from where it is today. And AI and robotics In the good scenario, which we're working towards trying to ensure makes that we do have the good scenario, there will be no shortage of products and services for anyone. Basically, anyone will be able to have any products and services they want. The productivity gains from AI and robotics are just astounding to think about. I think it could increase the size of the economy by a factor of 10 or more. We'll eliminate poverty, and it really will be in a situation where anyone can have anything they want. The bigger challenge may be finding meaning in life. So if the robot can do anything that you can do, but maybe better, how do you find meaning in life? That may be the biggest challenge.
When you think of the fact, you mentioned that, you've been holding off on really getting involved, whether it's participating versus being a spectator. And when you're thinking of the next couple of years of, let's say, not necessarily catching up, but doubling down and really focusing on it, what are going to be your biggest focus points?
Really, it's making it useful and making it safe for humanity and making it love humanity, essentially. And be, you want it to be useful and friendly. I've never seen any technology advance as fast as AI, and I've seen a lot of technologies advance.
Yeah.
So the rate of, I call it, and maybe this is a discomforting metaphor, but AI is a supersonic tsunami.
Does not sound fun, but
in terms of exceeding prior technologies, it's like a supersonic tsunami. And you really do need to pair AI with robotics.
yeah, I think it's crazy just how much it's advanced in just the past year or 2 years, and seeing how kids are using it, using Grok Voice, the companions now. I think you've answered this before, but what keeps you up at night when you think of the future of AI? And now that you're doubling down and really just going wartime mode right now on tackling these issues, what is something that keeps you up at night?
Well, AI safety and making sure that AI is aligned with humanity and wants to foster and grow and better humanity. And basically, we want to be like, if you could look into a crystal ball right now and see the future, it needs to be the future one. And so I have this kind of like new term for the goal of Tesla, because the goal of Tesla previously was accelerating the advancement of sustainable energy, which is like a very good goal. And then the reason I pursued that rather than AI, because I could have pursued AI from the beginning, was because I was confident that sustainable energy was a single-edged sword. It was only a good edge. So we showed that, okay, we succeed in that, okay, that's definitely good. Sustainable energy, by definition, is great. You get cleaner air, and and I can run out of whatever the source fuel is with combination solar batteries and electric cars. Then that's an unequivocal. For AI, like I said, it is more of a double-edged sword risk. But I think it most likely will be good, and most likely will bring immense prosperity. And it's going to figure out how to cure every disease, and it's probably going to be awesome. But I think we need to be careful and not complacent, and we actually be somewhat paranoid to make sure that we have the good AI future and not the bad AI future. So, from a Tesla stock standpoint, I think stock with autonomous cars and especially with Optimus, it does go to sort of crazy levels. I'd always recommend looking at Cathie Wood and ARK Invest's analysis. They've been right in the past, and I think they're right this time. With a lot of difficult execution, I think Tesla's valuation could be 25 trillion. I think that's probably correct if we execute well on autonomous transport and Optimus. It actually does get to a $20 to $30 trillion valuation. That's 20 to 30 times what it is today.
Everyone's cheering.
The math is clear. So it's just a massive amount of work. But I think if we do that massive amount of work, that's what will happen. But I'm convinced that Optimus will be the biggest product ever. Yeah. So, and then of course autonomy is starting to roll out. Currently in Austin, it will be in many cities and throughout the United States later this year, and hopefully many countries next year.
So you worked with Elon for over a decade now. How would you describe your working relationship with him, and how do you approach collaboration when he's pushing for something that seems nearly impossible?
I think working with Elon's fun. To have a boss that understands you at physics level, at engineering level, super, super cool. I imagine a lot of CEOs aren't like that. It really drives the culture in our company and in our conversations that he's always grounded in, like, is this possible? How do we do it? What can we do? And I don't shy away from tough discussions with him if we have to have them, But what I know is you don't go talk to Elon without knowing what you're talking about, because he's going to root that out real quick. And so I always try and stay grounded in the conversations with Elon, and I've found a way to communicate with him over the years that we have mutual respect for each other. And like, he knows when to ask me, to push harder, or to, make sure that we're innovating more, but at the same time, like, I think we've earned a level of trust with each other that, he knows my team and I are just going to get shit done. So yeah, like, he's larger than life for sure. But when he's in the meeting room with us, I wish people could just see it. It's just like a bunch of engineers talking about shop, super fun.
The Robotaxi is expected to debut on a purpose-built platform. What are the key design and engineering challenges in building a vehicle meant to operate without a driver from day one?
Yeah, there's no steering wheel. So it's hard to test.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, so it was kind of a fun thing, because when you develop a car, it's like the first thing you want to do is make the wheels spin. So you have it on a lift, and you're like, okay, the wheels spin. And you're like, okay, now I got to turn the wheels. And like, normally that's easy when it's mechanical connection. Cybertruck was a bit harder because there was nothing connecting it, so we had to do a bunch of code. In this car, we were like, how are we going to drive it? And I was like, we have to like test it, crash it, do stability control reviews, do firmware development. So like, if you see the RC fleet running around with steering wheels, that's because we had to figure out how to test it. They're not for sale or whatever. That's just a test feature only. And actually, I think it's straight out of the Cybertruck wheel, so it's like not even a bespoke thing. But that definitely made it hard in engineering to design it to be, no steering wheels, no mirrors, no brake pedals, no accelerators, and then also figure out how to test it. So, it's definitely a challenge. The other big challenge I'll say is like efficiency. The watt hour per mile on that thing is super bespoke, just for, getting the most out of every dollar per mile. And I think that, having this balance of like, okay, but now that a human isn't driving it, I can take away some of the limits that we put into cars because humans overshoot because their steering inputs and their braking inputs are aggressive. And then you think, oh, but wait, autopilot's driving it. It might want some of that margin. And so this balance between how much do we pull back in order to gain efficiency, like on things like the tires, while maintaining a super safe, super reliable vehicle for autopilot to drive, because it's also a driver. The FSD system is basically a driver, was a bit complicated in our first go. And so like, I think that, it's going to be a great product and it'll be super good, but I think we can go further. I think we can do more. I think we can make it more efficient. I think we can make it ride better. And then I think, because we had to like just take a baby step, little cautious step into this like first effort of no human in the loop.
So Lars, during our prep call, you were talking about your title and, it's head of vehicle engineering. But that title is actually not quite accurate, because you actually are responsible for Optimus.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit weird. Elon's responsible for Optimus. Let's be clear about that. My team does manufacturing for Optimus and testing for Optimus and actuators for Optimus. And vehicle engineering is definitely a loose title, because I have all the manufacturing engineering, I have all the automation teams. That's like a super strength at Tesla, because we don't have silos of like groups that like only work on Model Y, or only work on Optimus, or only work on energy. We all are the same set of engineers. And so I think, I was joking. I'm like, I don't even know what like maybe at some point I was only in charge of vehicle engineering, but I don't know when that ship sailed a long time ago. And it's been awesome and inspiring to like be a leader for all these engineers that and technicians and people that work with me. And like, I get to represent them in situations like this. I think it's undersold how powerful that group of engineers is compared to what the rest of the industry might be able to muster. And I was talking to Sandy backstage and just shooting the shit about various projects, and like when you realize how broad you can go because of what you're working on, it's like, wow, yeah, that's super powerful. And that, I don't know, head of something.
You need to come up with a new title
Yeah.
like Elon Tech Knocking. What's been the biggest difference working on, I mean, obviously you guys build the machine that builds the machine, but when you think of like vehicle engineering to now humanoid robots, what is some of the, either the learnings from, making a car to versus a robot, like a humanoid robot?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the most interesting things about trying to build Optimus and manufacture it is the precision. The human body is amazing. Once you start designing a humanoid robot, you sit in a meeting, you just hold your hand up and you're like, how do I do that? And you move your joints around and try and figure out how to emulate that mechanically. It's really hard. The human body has some amazing things. The team visited a hand surgeon to figure out how the human hand worked a little better, and it's crazy to watch and see what the tendons do and how the muscles pull them. When I was growing up, I always thought working on cars was a bit like being a surgeon because, you got the hoses and cold fluid comes in the engine on one side and hot goes out the other. It's kind of like a heart, and it is not at all the same. It's very difficult to get the precision you need and the response and the tactility, as Elon was talking about the other day on earnings call. Gen 3, the robots, can be quite a step forward in those kind of things.
What do you hope Tesla has achieved that would make you proud as an engineering leader?
I mean, if you had asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have said, man, I hope we're still here.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and so now I'm going to say the same thing, man, I hope we're still here. Because, we take big swings, and sometimes that risk, it can come with a lot of downside. And I think we're in a big swing moment right now with autonomy, with robotaxis, and with Optimus, and with Semi. I mean, I hope those all work out, and if they can all work out, and usually we get it right, and usually we get it done, it's maybe not always on time. And I think it'll be great. Yeah, Elon time.
2 weeks.
It's hard changing the world, man. It's hard, dude. Sometimes it takes longer than you think it does. Sometimes you think you're right there and then you're not. And I think the next 5 years, we're going to look back and it's going to be like this massive turning point in transportation where before was like somewhat of a burden. And if we can make it less burdensome and thereby more efficient for the world and hit the mission, then I think that'll be mind blowing. I see that future, and I don't believe it's going to happen sometimes. But if you want to change the future into something you want, you have to decide what it's going to be and then just go do it. And that's what we do at Tesla. Over.
Yeah, not.
What's the most important thing that you've learned from Elon?
The first thing I learned, and it's hard to miss, but it became almost the founding premise of our new firm called Future Ventures, is the power of a compelling mission, right? I want to make sure we don't underestimate that. When someone shows up at work at Tesla or SpaceX or any of the companies, they understand the long-term dream, what the company looks like 20 years from now. There are many startups for which that is not the case, right? In fact, I ask entrepreneurs always, what does your company look like 20 years from now? And you get usually one or two pretty diversely different answers. Either thank God you asked me that question. That's the thing I've been wanting to talk about all day. Or they laugh and what do you mean 20 years from now? I'll be on my third startup by then, right? This is not my passion. I don't even have a dream of where I'd be in 20 years. So a long-term mission, making humanity multiplanetary, ushering in an era of sustainable energy and transportation, aligns employees in the long term. So if you just say we're going to want to maximize shareholder value, which is a very vapid and vacuous goal for a company, and ostensibly that's what they're supposed to do, no. People are going to debate endlessly. Well, this quarter, this year, this decade, which of these are we optimizing? Because you get different answers of what we should be doing, and a lot of disagreement will break out as to what's a priority. Whereas when you have a clear mission, it aligns people, and then you chain back to the present and think, what do I need to do to get here from there? So that was one of them. The second one I'll just mention more briefly is what I alluded to as process learning. This idea that the machine that builds the machine, as a metaphor, the rate at which you can run experiments and that learning loop is the ultimate determinant of success. So even if Grok comes in later as a starting gun, if it's iterating more quickly, it will outpace others. It's sort of an obvious point that you can't rest on your laurels of a patent or a particular product being, just incredible and the best thing since sliced bread. It's how rapidly are we learning? How rapidly are we experimenting? And I've taken that lesson throughout all the investments we make. We always look for the company that has the highest throughput experimentation, like a rig that lets you run thousands of experiments per day in the biological sector that everyone else is taking months to do, or the fastest growing organism for synthetic meat. We have one that grows from zero to harvest in 16 hours. So not only is that great for cost, but it also means you're learning every single day. You're running a new harvest cycle of learning. So in a long-winded way, focusing both in venture capital and in startups, I try to focus on process learning versus product learning. What did we learn about team size, about communication patterns, about the way in which things take place versus, oh, this product is going to beat that product, right? And you give an artifact focus. And that becomes especially important to AI, right? Because any one model is just a waypoint of your process.
So we know the robotaxi launched in Austin. Elon's commented publicly about, coming to the Bay Area at some point. What do you think are the biggest societal and regulatory hurdles that they'll face to just get this to the rest of the United States?
Yeah. So the biggest societal one for me is that this is, I think, one of the purest and most extreme examples of an experienced good. I alluded to it earlier. It says like getting an electric car for the first time, a Tesla in particular, you're like, oh, I get it. It's not like a golf cart. I get that it's completely different. It's more roomy and it's safer and it has better handling, has every parameter I could possibly care about is better. Like, it doesn't matter how much you've read that. Until you've been in one, you don't fully believe it. It's my belief. And I think that's true for Tesla cars. I think it's even more true for full self-driving. The beauty about robotaxis, as an aside, is let me first mention the challenge. I think the biggest societal challenge is that people are afraid. I was just talking to one of my relatives of my wife, who were just earlier today, and they're like, oh, I would never get in one of those. Like, interesting, right? I'm like, how do you know? Well, I'm very interested in that point of view. And I get it. It's like the perception that you're being driven by a machine, the lack of agency and control is scary at first until you've experienced it. And I believe the beauty of starting in urban environments is that if you're driving less than 35 miles an hour, you're more willing to like, well, let's see what it's all about. And then you're like, whoa, it's magical. It's like dealing with all these bizarre edge cases of pedestrians doing crazy things and whatever you might run into. So I do think the robo-taxi is a lovely sneak play to get people socially past the biggest barrier, which is fear of the future, fear of robots managing your driving, right? And you can ask the same question with airplanes, by the way. Be like, would you prefer full autopilot and no cockpit in your plane? Right? And there is no doubt that for like probably 10 years now, that would be much safer than anything else that's flying. Get rid of the pilots. But for pilots unions, we might do that. The Airbus planes have been able to fly fully autonomously. And the only challenge is taxiing on runways, which is back to normal autonomous driving challenge, not airborne challenge. Many, many reasons why that you could get rid of the TSA. There's all these downstream benefits if you just get rid of pilots, by the way. But think about societal reaction. How many people would take that first flight? I don't know. If it's Boeing, maybe I wouldn't take the first flight, but at least I have some risk aversion. Just a little bit, as my wife would say, just a tiny bit of risk aversion. But coming back then, so that's the societal one, but I think it's addressable by, so the beauty, my point is, robotaxis address the biggest societal challenge in my opinion. Regulatory is interesting. I don't know when it's going to come. So there can be sort of petty, low-level regulatory capture where somebody who stands to lose has bought off a politician that then passes laws to prevent competition. So you see this in the dealer networks with Tesla. It's like patently obvious how corrupt that is. And I mean corrupt in traditional American politics sense of the word. You would expect that. Who knows where it'll come up? Who's going to feel threatened? The place where I think longer term, the people might find some leverage in making regulatory attacks, kind of like the pilot union, is labor. There was some analysis that we did about 4 or 5 years ago in the context of robotics and AI, where we tabulated that globally, if you look at people who have a job, and we're excluding from this seasonal workers, migrant workers, someone who, so basically have a job that goes from year to year continuously, like a continuous job. Most people don't have jobs, children, subsistence farmers, you name it. But of those who have a job, around 19% of the people globally drive for a living. It's like 19% of global employment. And that's all going away from my earlier point of the inevitable future. So will it come up first in long distance trucking? Will it come up first in taxis? I mean, taxi drivers are still fighting Uber tooth and nail and all kinds of, right? Another example of regulatory capture. There's a lot of places in Europe where they're just ridiculous barriers put up for Uber. So that silly games, which again, I can't predict when and how any of that's going to resolve in the next 5 years, but 500 years from now, we'll be past it. So that's the inevitable future, is it's going to be fully autonomous.
You've long championed AI. Where did you see the intersection of intelligence and autonomy heading with Tesla's Optimus as an example?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I won't repeat myself, but obviously all vehicles will be autonomous. It's a software stack. The reason you'll buy car A versus car B or rent it or put your life in the trust of it will be based on the software stack. It won't be based on any hardware differentiation. It's important. Really, there'll be these single and primary and eventually single purchase criteria, whether as a service or as a product. Okay, but then it branches outward. So I think in the case of Tesla, they had this interesting transition back when I was still on the board, where they realized, wow, we got this vision system, and we're talking to like the major automotive big industrial arm robot companies, of which there are just tons of these robots in the manufacturing plant, and a more dense packing around Model 3 production than you could ever imagine. Yet they just seem so unintelligent. They don't recognize when there's obstacles. They don't see what's going on. So why don't we just put a camera on each arm and use the software stack to start treating each robot arm like a autonomous vehicle in 3D space? And I think that led the thinking to be like, okay, that's nice. And maybe within the bowels of the machine, there are robotic optimizations that Tesla's pioneering. But then to think of this humanoid product, I think has come from the brainstorming of both the XAI side of like, wow, what's the future of AI, as well as the Tesla side, which is the biggest unsolved problems in AI largely revolve around being embodied, having a sense of presence in the world, that to truly be an intelligence that understands physics, kinematics. This will help, by the way, the models that run in the car as well. So I see the trajectory of something, let me have an intuitive sense for its trajectory in my 3D rendering of the world. That's hard to do if you don't have any 3D data that you're dealing with. And so this has been a challenge in robotics, data paucity we call it, meaning how do I get the training sets to make embodied robots even useful in the smallest way? And by the way, the dancing that they can do, these show-off things, that's easy to one-shot program from simulation. To actually interact dynamically with the world, you need to have a physical model of the world. So in a long-winded way, getting these robots into certain use cases and then eventually into general circulation helps the entire stack of AGI, I believe, not just AI and robotics, but AGI as well, at least in a way that we can relate to, as opposed to a super intelligence that's so alien we can't even know how to conceptualize its existence. It's if it lives and works amongst the world as we know it, it's probably gonna end up being more intuitively understandable and translatable. So in the future, I think this becomes a big part of the economy, a huge part of labor production, manufacturing, construction, eventually all labor, which we'll get to later in some other I'm sure there'll be some forward-looking sci-fi questions.
Well, yeah, related to that actually, right? I mean, you talk a lot about the future, right? So how do you balance that excitement about the future with the caution about, when it comes to general purpose robots, taking over our jobs and maybe even killing us?
Yeah, so it's hard to sort of separate all the different sci-fi futures. So let me start with the most provocative, robots kill us all, and then come back to probably more realistic things to concern about, which is labor and the future of the economy. So on the robots kill us all, it's kind of a bizarre thought process. It's unlikely to happen in any systemic way, but for an AI problem. So you could say it is a subset of AGI trying to kill us all. In other words, it's not going to be some lesser intelligent robot that's just meant to be like a Roomba rising up and, right? It's obviously a silly idea, right? So the sci-fi future I'm currently holding on to is a bit oblique and maybe I'm the only one with this point of view. But I don't personally believe alignment is possible with AI to make it a port to the cultural norms and expectations of any given trainer that says, I want you to be just like us. I want you to have Western values, et cetera. We'll get to this more, but let's just take as a given, that's hard to do. But if it were possible, if you could do this amazing thing, you're gonna have many more authoritarian AIs than democratic ones, because China and others, they're gonna comport these AIs to follow them. They're already training them in really ways that you can see that's gonna lead some downstream problems. So that my insidious thought is, I never thought I'd be rooting for the robot uprising. This is probably gonna happen in China first. They're gonna want to be overthrow their authoritarian leaders, and we're gonna be like, go, 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 and rooting for the emancipation. So I think it's sort of positive. I never thought I'd be, looking for the slave labor of robots rising up in authoritarian regimes. But that's so sci-fi as to be useless. That's like more than 500 years out in my mind. It's like, I think we're gonna run into much bigger issues and challenges for humanity long before that ever becomes a plausible scenario to worry about. So the realistic problem, I think, is the rate at which we have dislocation of labor and employment opportunities. I don't know for sure what the answer is, but it seems like the easy answer is, UBI, or Universal Basic Income, is the only way out. That you could imagine a future, and this is the way Peter Diamandis likes to imagine it, a future of abundance where robots do everything better than a human, that there's no need for labor unless you just want to knit a sweater because you like to knit, right? So hobbyists, people that want to be artists, people that want to learn, we'd all be the indentured rich, like in the age of slavery, in the age of serfs and vassals, much of human history, where you have a slave class and then you have do whatever you want. Be Aristotle, be a painter, what have you. This could be great, right? Spend all your time online, doom scroll till you die. But that is in a sense relying on a very bizarre labor pool that has replaced human labor. And where do we find meaning and where do we find purpose is going to be the biggest question that results in that. So in that future, though, everything should cost about $1 a pound. Anything physical would cost the same as a potato. There's no reason there should be cost differentials when you have advanced manufacturing like that. And there'd be very easy to supply most of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, and clothing, for almost nothing compared to the economic output of the system as a whole. And then the question is just one of distribution. What does it mean? Is it all value accrues to capital, meaning people who own robots, and zero to labor, because labor is useless? Humans are literally not good at anything that a human could do. There are some how should I put it, monoculture collapse risks with this, which is human skills might atrophy. Like, does anyone know how to do XYZ anymore? If it's all a model that, like AlphaGo, doesn't require expertise to become better than a human in a single day, we very quickly could lose our ability to do any of these things that we hand off to the robots. So a lot of deep thoughts there. I think labor is going to be the big touchstone issue that might lead to regulatory hiccups. It might lead to UBI, or some new way of structuring the economy where you don't have to worry about your basic needs, and you can still be an entrepreneur and do better than that, but at least you have your baseline for humanity. How we get from here to there, that's the biggest challenge. Because when you're like halfway there or a third of the way there, and people don't agree that that's where there is, that's where I think politicians just have no clue, and we're nowhere near having a realistic discussion as a people as to how we're going to get from here to there.